Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Small Business Stories. You know me, you know the voice, Dr. LL. Loralyn Mears here with a different guest every week, talking to you about all kinds of things related to entrepreneurship and small business. In the house today, we have got Kira Shishkin. And if the name sounds familiar, I'm not surprised. He's got his hands in a few things, but where his real focus is on his news business. He's building a whole media company that's reaching us everywhere, and it's called Informed Now. Hello, Kira. Welcome to the show.
Laurel, and thank you for having me. It's delightful to join you.
Well, we always give people the visual experience first because a lot of people, they're listening in their cars or whatnot. And there's a couple of aspects I want to talk about the visual appeal of the room. He has the biggest plushy velvet cushions behind him that just looks so inviting. I would never get any work done in that office. That's the first thing. The second is that Kira has, within the last week or two, gone from Tokyo to LA and is now live from London, and you look as fresh as a daisy. So, what's your secret for jumping time zones?
Oh gosh, I'm still figuring it out, but I'm just so excited to talk to you. So I'm feeling very energized as a result.
See, I have that effect on people. Even time zones won't weigh people down. They come in, they're like, I am ready for this show. All right. So, folks like you have an unusual origin story. You've done this, that, and everything. You're like an entrepreneurial octopus with your hands in a lot of things. Talk to us about what that common theme is between all the ventures that you've had. Maybe even roll it back first. Let folks know about some of the ventures you've been involved in, then anchor us in informed, and then we'll talk about what the common thread is between all of those things.
Totally. Wow. You can only connect the dots looking backwards. So, moving forwards, it was always unpredictable and sometimes, very opportunistic. And I wouldn't say there was a consistent theme. But now looking backwards, I'm able to see a little bit of that. So I started my entrepreneurial journey with a publishing business. We actually published textbooks on American history. And that's something I was really passionate about at the time. I was kind of getting my hands dirty in that whole world. It was very physical good, very brick and mortar in many ways, but I loved it. So the next venture was completely different, and it was really, I think, a love of learning, right? That I think is probably like a thread that may be articulated. Is obviously history books were a showcase of a love for learning and helping other folks enable that. And the next crypto phase was for me a huge learning myself. Like it was such a challenge of trying to understand the space in 2016, where people didn't have a lot of understanding, a lot of sophistication around the crypto world. It was still pretty fringe, although it wasn't the earliest days. And that was my next business. After that, I was kind of brought into incubation of a company within a larger enterprise environment, and there it was definitely a little bit different from kind of what I've done before, but it was a marketplace business, an expert marketplace that connected tax filers with tax accountants in a way that really facilitated trust, business growth for the tax accountant, and real confidence from the side of the tax filer. So it's a little bit different, maybe a deviation from the theme. And that brings me to Inform.now, which is kind of both our brand name and our website. And that's a venture that I'm really focused on. And it certainly has that thread of the love of learning, in this case, learning about the world. And I think it picks up on a few other personal threads in my life that I feel like I'm rediscovering and re honoring through this venture in ways that I haven't had the chance to do over the last ones.
Ooh, this is one of the reasons why I was so excited to have you on the show. Now, to be fair, hey, other guests, if you're listening to this, I love having everybody on this show. I learn something every time. With you, Kira, though, I had a bit of a kindred spirit moment because you've spent your life and career on the bleeding edge, not the leading edge, getting into all these new technologies, really, truly as an early adopter, that we would label you as that. And I want to get into what was that spark moment when you realized, oh, I need to create a minimalist news media? company, and I'm going to create, inform.now. I'm going to keep it really simple, kind of like tweets, but for news, but on SMS. And how did all of that come about? What was the genesis behind that?
Totally. I mean, I think it's worth maybe digging into some other personal threads that don't really showcase through the previous ventures as much, but definitely come out strongly for the Inform.now one, which is there was a point in my life where I lost my attention. I lost my ability to focus. It was due to a physical and cognitive disability that I've experienced as a child, and it really changed the trajectory of my life. And so for a couple of years, following a car accident, I couldn't focus. I couldn't wield my attention. And it was such a, huge loss. I felt it was a bigger loss than any of the physical impairments that I've suffered. And that experience of not being able to wield your attention was something that just completely, shook me to the core. It's like, wow, like the human superpower is our ability to wield our attention. And when that's robbed from us, when that's taken from us, we become very, very limited. And when I observe the news media industry in America, I feel like the attention terrorism that is so commonplace in the news media, in the legacy news media industry, takes focus away from all of us. It takes our attention away. It takes our agency away as part of that as well. And so there was a real spark, and I don't know if vengeance is the right word. I don't think of it as I don't think of myself as a vengeful person or as the driving force of my life, but there was a sense of a chip on my shoulder around, wow, I really don't want to relive this experience personally, and I don't want anyone else to relive the experience of having their attention stolen from them. And so that spirit led me to think, wow, we really need to build a solution that honors people's time, attention, focus, and peace of mind. It doesn't emotionally trigger you, doesn't manipulate you, doesn't try to, hijack your attention and hold it hostage. And that was the spirit behind starting the Form.now.
Okay, so a few things there. First, I'm glad to see that you have recovered and you're back here and in this world where you need to be delivering all kinds of innovative solutions. So that's fantastic. I also get what you mean when you talk about just being hurt and unable to do things in focus. I was in a wicked car accident about a decade ago, cracked sternum, ribs, the whole thing. But the
Wow.
physical stuff, burnt my hands on the when the car hit, then the airbag went off. Of course, there's gunpowder in. I didn't know you're supposed to release the wheel when you're in an accident. Who knew? And so all my hands were burnt. Like, so just lots of nasty stuff. But when I was going through my cancer treatments, I really got all of the brain fog and all these things from all of the drugs and stuff that I was on and just the changes my body was going through trying to fight that damn disease. And so I get it because when we're intellectual people, we think for a living. This is what we do. And I
Mhm.
can really appreciate how scared you must have been. That's phenomenal to think that you've recovered and how you used it, right? So many people say make your mess your message. So I love that you're on that path. Now, let's get back to this where you said, okay, there's a lot of news terrorism and all of this sorts of thing. That's what you wanted to fix. What signs did you have from the marketplace, right? Because it's all about product market fit that said this whole media and news thing, it's a problem worth tackling.
Totally. Well, I think, the there are multiple ways to describe it. I think probably the most convincing one is people stop reading the news, right? Is like when you look at the average person, across different age brackets, but especially the younger people, younger millennial, a Gen Z person, they are so like their tolerance for BS tends to be, pretty low, especially like the new Gen Z generation. Um, and when they look at legacy solutions, like net legacy news media solutions, they're like, "What? I'm not reading this." And there's a lot of folks sort of, grown up with the Fox News, the CNN, the CNBC, the infrastructure, the information infrastructure of America. They are so frustrated and they are in disbelief of the reporting that's shared, and they've resigned sort of from reading news. So you kind of have these two behaviors. One is, younger folks who are already of age of awareness and interest in the world that are not buying these solutions because they're like, I'm not reading this stuff. And there are folks that have already been through readership of the legacy media and they're like resigning from it. They're like, don't believe it. I don't get value. I don't feel informed. I feel manipulated. I feel influenced. And so you have that happening at scale. I mean, there are surveys that are running and that have run for years that are showing substantial drops in news readership across all these different brackets and substantial drop in trust towards news. And it's not hard to believe because I think you and I may fit in those brackets, or at least at some point over the last few years, it's really hard to deny this influence.
I know when I look at that, I think, yes, totally. I am so aligned with that. I may be Gen X, but I tell everybody I identify as Gen Z because the same sorts of ideologies and things, looking, embracing gigging, looking at the news and looking at it with such a deep skepticism that I'm constantly trying to figure out where do I get my news? I used to get it mostly from X and I loved it, back in the days when it was Twitter and it was 140 characters. That was fabulous. I felt informed. Everybody was on top of the world. And then, of course, I think it has since devolved, but that's a whole other separate story. And I look at this and I look at what you're doing with informed.now, and you are intentionally minimalistic about it. And I think about how you're trying to bring in human-centric sorts of qualities so that people can connect with the stories and news, but in such abbreviated chunks. What did you have to trade off to make that happen?
Totally. And I think the news, like the legacy news media, is going for maximalism, right? So there is, all these podcasts, videos, anchors, TV, radio, articles. You open an article and it opens six other articles, and there's all these images, and it's very rich media. And this rich media is, generally pretty overwhelming because when you're trying to get news, you're not really going for entertainment, you're going for information, and you probably have a very specific interest or a specific strain of interests, but you're being fed a lot of things that are kind of outside of what you're actually looking to learn about and get informed about. And this sort of force feeding that happens, you know is causing this sentiment that we've observed, that we've studied, which is people don't want more, they want less.
Mm.
And that less, begs the question, okay, well, if we had to artificially confine ourselves, right, and say, well, Laurel is a very busy, she's an owner, she's an entrepreneur, she is a, head of a family, like she's her time is important and she's time conscious. If she only had 30 seconds per day to look at news, what should make that cut? And so that's the lens editorially, technologically, and just like overall in our ethos that we bring is if you only read news for 30 seconds a day, and we really believe that you shouldn't have to read news for much longer than that, just because you have been over the many years, it's not because that was the right way to do it, it's because the industry demanded that you do that. Right. So if you were to confine your news reading time to 30 seconds a day, what's going to make that cut? And we focus on what we call world changing world news.
This is spot on. This is exactly, I think, what folks like me, like others, really need. And then it also, I think, minimizes some of that sense of overwhelm and dread that's being pushed into us. It's not just the manipulation of the media, it's the negative stories. We never used to hear about someone in Nigeria who was consumed and swallowed by a boa constrictor, or hear about someone who was running through the outback and then got attacked by some scary monster. I mean, we didn't hear about all of these things. And now these stories are just flooding our inboxes. And as you said, you can't look at one thing. You're bombarded, the pop-ups, the this, the that. It's absolutely impossible. All right, where I want to switch gears now is get into AI, because obviously AI is here, out of Pandora's box, not going back in ever. And now we've got to try to figure out. And I look at, as someone who has carried a press pass and as a journalist, you look at that journalist code where you are supposed to deliver news ethically, responsibly, all this sort of good stuff. And we look at AI, which is generating more content in a day than humans can consume around the globe. What do you think journalism's going to look like in, never mind even 5 years, in 1 or 2 years with the onslaught of AI and the degradation of quality?
Totally. I think of it as, it's very reductionist, but I do think there is sort of I don't know if you're a Star Wars enthusiast, but there's like a
Yes,
there's a light and a dark side here. And
I love it. We are kindred spirits. See?
uh, and the Siths, what they're doing essentially is they're leveraging AI to generate noise, right? Because AI, at least the AI technology that we have today, are large language models, which is sort of an evolution of a word cloud. I remember that word cloud website that you could just throw a bunch of words on and it will just make a word cloud for you. It's sort of a little bit similar to that, right? It's a word regurgitation machine. It's a word bag. It's a bag of words. And the way it proceeds is by guessing the best next word for any sort of prompt. That's the way an LLM functions. It guesses what's the best next word to put here, given the string of characters that I've already output as a machine or the prompt that the user has given us. It's really just a word regurgitation machine, right? And it has a pretty big training base of all of the internet. And so that's impressive and it can be leveraged in effective ways. But where the Siths are using it from the dark side is they're using it to generate content that is, inherently very low value, right? So, for example, instantly generating articles that have spin or articles that have misleading details or articles that just take up real estate, mental bandwidth, because they exist and they're long, but they don't really tell you anything particularly valuable. The propensity or the ability to generate that at scale and at instant speed creates a real kind of flooding risk in the news industry of, most people don't have the time or the sophistication to do a lot of the research to find out, okay, so what do I trust? Where do I stand? And so they can be very vulnerable to getting arriving at an article that may be, very predatory and is either has, straight up malicious intent with misinforming you or, spinning a certain direction, or it just has sort of neutral malicious intent of like taking up your time and, just verbosity that's just taking up your attention where it's not really giving you the value, right? It's not really informing you. So that's sort of the dark side of the industry. And I think a lot is going to come from the outside, not necessarily from within the journalist walls, but from outside of folks that are looking to disrupt in a negative way the industry, are looking to influence, from a foreign perspective. This is out of the ordinary, but Russia looking to influence elections, looking to influence political decisions of other countries. This would be one of the most primary ways that they would be able to do that. And we've already seen this kind of playbook play out. The other side, the light side, are, the Jedi. We are the Jedi. I'd like to think. I'm the Yoda attire here. To anyone who's uh, not watching the video, I'm in my Yoda robe, and it's really leveraging AI to declutter and denoise and to neutralize news in many ways, to read all of this noise, to consume it, and to figure out what the actual fact base is, what the essence is, and what is actually worth your time to read. And so I do think that you mentioned 5 years, you mentioned 1 or 2 years. I think we're months away from a world where reading news without an AI filter is going to be impossible, right? It's going to be impossible to consume information because of the floodgates have been already opened and it's already very overwhelming. And I don't call it information overload anymore. I call it misinformation overload.
Oh yeah, I mean spot on. And I love the analogy to Star Wars because I'm sure some of our listeners out there are also Star Wars kids, right? Like I love the movie. And in Yoda, right? There is no try, only do, right? So in that vein, if I look at the opportunities for misjudgment. So there's misinformation, there's things, but as editors and when you're curating news and putting it out there, there's always the opportunity for a judgment error, right? It happens. People make just poor decisions, even though we all try, right? And we've always got to assume positive intent. I look at the BBC, that used to be my go-to, but 30 years later, it's coming out that they manipulated poor Princess Diana. right? And how that all played out. So if you think back on Inform.now, even just in recent times, right, on that journey, have you made an editorial judgment call that you went, oops, I wish I wouldn't have done that one?
Well, that's part of the purity of our mission is that we don't really allow editorial judgment to cloud what we focus on. So it's a lot less around, what is it, what does Kira think, or what does the team of Informed Now think, and it's more of a model. And when I say model, I don't necessarily mean like an AI model. I mean it's more like a process that we follow and a standard that is a mix of technology and talent, but it's ultimately a philosophy. And that philosophy you can call utilitarianism, but it is essentially we only focus on things that are changing the world actively, and not just for like a few hundred people, but for thousands and millions of people around the globe. And we focus on that level of importance only. And our filter, like you can call it our editorial filter, only focuses on the most kind of impactful events based on a very simple question, which is how many people are affected, how much. And when we talk about being affected, how much, it's usually a change in optionality, freedom, security, economic power, purchasing powers, things that are really affecting a household or family or person's life at scale. And so there isn't a lot of room for editorial judgment in here because we just subscribe to the specific filter and model that we've developed that prioritizes what we call significance. And it's as objective as I think we could create it. Obviously, there's always more objectivity, but that's kind of how we filter things. There isn't an editorial process where we just roll a dice and say, okay, let's talk about this, talk about that. It's much more around we know exactly what the philosophy of our editorial curation is, and that's what we bring to people every day.
And so this whole news you can't skip, news, you're glad you saw and all of this. Has anyone ever said, clickbait? Because there's haters out there everywhere, and entrepreneurs, we know this. And some of us do better than others overcoming that hate. And unfortunately, a lot of folks that we see that are in the public eye, I'm thinking a lot of influencers, they're bombarded and they just don't have the resilience to be able to navigate or tolerate all of that hate that comes through with success. How are you managing? Are people saying, oh, clickbait, Kira, inform.now, it's clickbait, it's clickbait? Anybody saying that?
Well, I'm sure we've received a whole lot of you know actually,
No?
I can't say we have really because
Good.
we receive so much support from our users, the people we care about. We don't really drag along people who are not sure about us, right? Because we are a paid service, so it's very cheap. It's intentionally very affordable and accessible to anyone who wants to have the power of facts. But we don't carry people on our platform that aren't bought into the idea. So it's actually a bit more exclusive, and so I think that in some ways protects us from random stranger kind of rage on the internet because we only kind of partner with folks who are already, they see the value that we bring and they're looking for this value. And we make it really easy to leave. Like, so if somebody doesn't like it, it's like, hey, just text stop and it's done. We actually receive the opposite feedback of we've never been called clickbait ever because more often than not, our users say this is the opposite of clickbait. Like this, what you do is the length of a headline, but it is the content of the entire article, which is unfamiliar to most people and really not something that folks are used to. That you can actually deliver information, value, and meat of the content without being particularly verbose and having it in the length of a headline. And that's the opposite of clickbait, right? Because we don't sensationalize things, we don't dramatize things. We try to neutralize and deliver things as they are, without commentary, without clickbaiting the person essentially. And so we actually have a lot of processes in place that neutralize our news to be the opposite of clickbait. We believe that news should be boring because that's what news is, right? It should be boring, dry, in some ways clinical. And if you want entertainment, that's entertainment. That's not news. And these are two different buckets. So it's funny, we've received probably some small minority of negative comments, mostly just people leaving and saying, "Hey, I want something different." But we've never heard someone call us clickbait, because it's very much the opposite of what we do.
I suspected that. We'll call that the gift so you could articulate your value proposition in a non-salesy way. This is how the podcast works. So, all right, moving along from there. You've done so many different things. You've been in investment, strategy, startups, crypto. I mean, like I said, the entrepreneurial octopus. If you could go back, Kira, to your younger self and give yourself some unconventional advice, is there any?
I don't know if this is unconventional, but it's definitely not followed advice that I wish everybody followed a lot more boldly. And that is simply start now, right? It's don't wait until you're ready. You're never going to be ready. You're never going to be prepared. Don't wait until the conditions are perfect. The conditions are never going to be perfect. Don't wait for some sort of silver lining or some sort of, burning bush. Just start. If you have the instinct, you have the propensity, if you have any sort of, even a hint of a desire to run a project, to build a solution, just start now. It doesn't have to be dramatic. You don't have to quit your job. You don't have to do all these other dramatic actions, but just start today with whatever the smallest action looks like to begin this build, to begin this dream that you have and you want to bring into fruition. The biggest advice that's never followed, and I'm sure anyone who's going to hear this is not going to follow this anyway, but start now.
Excellent. And so your whole platform at inform.now is about being minimalist, right? Cutting through all the distraction, the crap, you said media terrorism. As an ADHD squirrel, right? That knowing that 50% of us in entrepreneurial like land are self-identified as ADHD little squirrels. How do you minimize distraction in your real life?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm definitely a squirrel, and I don't have a TV. I've actually never had a TV. That definitely helps. And I'm encountering more and more people as I go to my friends' houses that also don't have TVs. I think that's a pretty helpful first step, right? Is just cut out unintentional content, right? It's like for me, if I want to see a movie, I either go to a movie theater, which I love, or I look it up online and I, make the time to watch it. But it's more around like I'm being really intentional and I want to go and get that movie. I'm never stuck like watching a feed, right? Whether it's a social media feed or a TV feed or a radio. I'm not just passively consuming whatever is kind of thrown on me. I think that's a very taxing experience, at least for me. But I'm always being really intentional. And I'd rather have no TV and go buy a ticket to a movie when I want to see one, rather than kind of being a little bit beholden to this big screen that just turns on at some parts of the day and just shows me all these different images that I don't really control and aren't really intentional. So I think reducing very literally the noise infrastructure around us is really important. How else do I focus and reduce noise in my life? Um, I'm always doing an attention audit, right? And that's basically trying to write down a list of things that are taking up my brain space, my I call it
Mm.
brain width. It's a mix of bandwidth and brain space, right? It's a brain width. I'm looking at, what am I reading? What am I watching? What am I consuming? And where's my attention being kind of taken up or hijacked a little bit? And am I okay with that? And when I'm not, I'm trying to very consciously, writing out that list, say, okay, moving forwards, I'm going to, delete Instagram, or I'm going to, spend less time on X, Twitter. Doing those attention audits, I think, is also something that's helped me a lot.
Gotcha. All right. So I think we know the answer to this, but I always ask, where can our listeners find you and informed?
Totally. Well, I'm personally very friendly on LinkedIn. I am the only Kira Shishkin name in the world, which is a fun little fact, I guess. So I'm really easy to find. Kira Shishkin on LinkedIn. If anyone is excited to have a chat or wants to, thought partner or to connect, share feedback, anything of the sort, I'm really easy to reach. I'm always available. And to learn more about inform.now, it's best to go to inform.now, our website. I love that our brand is also our website. We're taking that page from acquisition.com book, where I think it's actually quite smart to kind of have the brand that's also the website because it's immediate, you know, direction. And there you can learn more about our impact, our mission, our purpose, and very easily join us because we would love to share our work with the media minimalists and the folks who want to be more mindful about news consumption. And it would be a pleasure to welcome anyone like that.
Excellent. I hope we're connected on LinkedIn, but we'll look at that a little later. So, last question. It is our signature question. I've asked hundreds and hundreds of people this question. If we got to look in your closet and there was a pair of footwear, clothing, accessory, something that personified who you, Kira Shishkin, is, tell us about it and why that piece of clothing or footwear or whatever is so Kira Shishkin.
I love that. I definitely love good clothes. So I think what comes to mind is I think my glasses. I don't know if that's like a closet item,
It's an
but
accessory. We'll take
yeah,
it. Yep,
yeah.
yep.
So the accessory of my glasses are something that I think is very core to me. I actually don't wear them publicly very often. I'm always wearing contacts, but I think to me they very stereotypically represent kind of my academic and intellectual uh, love and just how much I love learning about the world, digesting, thinking, intellectualizing, and just really using my brain a lot. I'm definitely a very like right hemisphere or right part of the brain person, and I think the glasses represent that nerdy, geeky part of me that I think sometimes a lot of people don't see from the outset, but I think is definitely the bones and the blood of my life is my geekiness and my nerdiness
Oh, I
represent the glasses.
excellent. I consider myself a cool nerd. So there we go. I told you we are kindred spirits. I knew it was going to happen. So, folks, that is a wrap. Kira Shishkin, founder of Informed.now, minimalist news that we all need to see and learn about. Thank you so much for being on the show and safe travels.